Thanks for staying up later. We hope you were with us last night for the first of our visits with Art Garfunkel. When we took a look at the tape, we discovered we couldn't confine it to just one show. So here we go again, picking it up with my question to Art about the concert in Central Park with Paul Simon in 1981. Were you satisfied with what came out of it? Were you creatively satisfied?
No. And it sounds so ungracious, but I'm crazed over my perfection thing. You know, I have standards that are unrealistically high. I was certainly gratified to see that attendance. As you know, that your score in show business is how many bought it, how many showed up. So when you see 500,000 people in the audience, you go, fabulous. I am in love with life. But I knew as we were singing it that it's a little loose, and that I wish we could be really smooth and impeccable like we can be. And when the show was over, I remember backstage saying to Paul, I don't think we did it. And Paul was sort of agreeing, because I talked him into it, and the next day he said, "You're crazy. That was a home run if ever there was one, on every level." And yes, in terms of show, impact, it was the great night in our lives. But I have very high standards. There's so much in our culture that I think it's good, but it's not the really great. It's not the Picasso stuff, or, you know.
There are a couple of songs on Bridge Over Troubled Water about you leaving to go make movies.
Yeah.
The Only Living Boy in New York and So Long, Frank Lloyd Wright. Were you aware at that time how bothered on some level Paul was by you going off to do this?
No. No. I went off and did Catch-22 because the way we recorded in all of those Simon and Garfunkel records was for Paul to write the tunes over a period of weeks and months. When 3 or 4 were ready, we went into the studio with Roy Halley and the musicians and recorded them over the next month. Then we stopped, and Paul wrote the next batch of 3 or 4. During that 3 or 4 month period of time, we were possibly touring, in which case I was living with the writing of the songs in the hotel rooms, and Paul would be in the Holiday Inn noodling on advancing the tune, and I would be thinking of the record we're going to make of it. If it weren't that, then I'd be elsewhere. So there were always these stops. When I went to do Catch-22, it was my intention to be in Mexico for a couple of months while Paul was working on the next batch of Bridge Over Troubled Water songs. The problem was, Paul was ready with the next batch before Mike Nichols was ready to release me from Guaymas, Mexico. So that's what made Paul, for the first time, feel, I have to wait for Artie, which, of course, is an unheard of thing.
Your performances in Catch-22 and, why is it slipping my mind, the second one?
Carnal Knowledge?
Carnal Knowledge.
Why is it slipping?
I have no idea. But in Catch-22 and Carnal Knowledge, they were both generally well received. Did that give you some additional satisfaction, not because you hadn't done good work with Paul Simon, but this was good work that stood alone, with Art Garfunkel's name on it alone?
Well, yes, it did, but the primary thing I loved about it was, remember, I looked at Simon and Garfunkel as these performers and 2 singers, one's blonde, one's dark, but I'm the puppeteer, as well as Paul. We move these guys. We send them out on the road, we make records, we make some of their records with more echo and some with less. As I looked from the outside at what you might call the image of Paul and Artie, it was my perception that Artie could use a little more beefing up. Paul played the guitar, Paul wrote the songs, Paul did most of the talking, and in the same way that I would have looked at the difference between McCartney and George Harrison, I looked at Paul and Artie, and I thought, Garfunkel in a movie is very nice for Simon and Garfunkel. See, that's something I don't think Paul's ever really believed. I don't think he sees that. And I loved doing those movies and bringing that enhancement of, you know, of what I can do back to the group. There's nothing more fascinating, I think, than duos. There were very few, you know. A duo is a great thing to play with. And I was playing with the perception of the two.
So you thought, had Simon and Garfunkel had a longer history together, your film success and the beefing up of your identity would only have helped?
Exactly. After a break of maybe 2 years from Bridge Over Troubled Water and this movie I made, I thought the next album we might have done would have been all the better because the two of us are now perceived even more richly.
I read somewhere...
Shows you how naive I was.
I read somewhere that Paul saw a screening of one of those two movies with you, I can't remember which one, and said to you as you walked out, "I couldn't do that."
Yes, he saw Carnal Knowledge because I was with him when it first played New York, and we sat way in the balcony, and it felt, even before the movie started, like New York loves this movie. It hasn't even started yet. There's some kind of excellent buzz. Maybe it was Nichols who was riding such a great wave, Mike Nichols, the director of it. And when it was over, and the audience received it real well, and I remember walking up from Cinema One, up 3rd Avenue with Paul on the way to some Chinese restaurant, Paul paying me the sweetest compliments, saying, "That was great, I'm really impressed. I could never have done that." It made me feel great, because I respect Paul as a critic like no one else. If I make a brilliant album, the main set of ears, other than my own, that I really want to hear and hear it and appreciate it is Paul. I know he hears records the way I do, and I know he knows, quote, the good stuff from the not.
Have you had occasion to talk to him about Rhythm of the Saints? Has he had occasion to talk to you about Lefty? Do you exchange ideas?
He played me a little of Rhythm of the Saints as he was working on it, and I thought it was excellent cooking stuff. Rhythms were very exciting.
Does he approve of the stuff you've done lately? Does he have a high opinion of it?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know how much he's heard it.
You said earlier that, by and large, celebrity and everything attached to it has been much more blessing than it has been imposition.
Absolutely.
But I would think also that for somebody who is a sensitive person, there has to be an aspect of celebrity that almost is, no matter how well-intended people are, it's almost an assault upon you. You have your thoughts, you have your relationships, and you have even somebody like me who, you can see, pulls up short, because the stuff that gets close to gossip, I kind of recoil from it, but it's sort of my job to try and find out something that's probably none of my business.
Well, how sweet of you to say that. That's very kind. Very rare that somebody would have that self-awareness over what it is to go after, to probe, to be curious about the artist, and that it may have an element of difficulty for the artist. This is a real life as well as a projected life, you know?
You said it, that's what I was trying to say. You said it better than I could have.
If you're late for the movie and it starts at 7:10 and somebody sees you at 7:02 and wants to go on and on about how important you are in their life, there's the quandary. It's my action. I don't want to say, I'm not the star, I'm just a guy late for the movies. It gets tricky that way. That's the least of it. There are probably deeper ways that one loses out on something while he gains on the celebrity life, maybe more than I realize. I've only lived this trip, and I'll never really know what kind of growth I would have had without it, personally.
I think also there's a healthy curiosity, and then there's a crass and leering kind of curiosity. If people have been affected by the music of Simon and Garfunkel, if it means more to them than just a catchy little tune, then naturally they're curious about the creative process, and knowing something about the kind of people who created this work would be useful and valid. On the other hand, at what point does that line cross into an inappropriate intrusion into a separate life? It's a hard thing to know.
It is. It's a very good question, and I wonder how others answer it. At Columbia College years ago, I remember talking about the cult of personality. We don't care so much what Bach's personal life was about. We think it's all about the notes he wrote. There's the genius. Stick to that, and you've got it. He's allowed to have picked his nose when he wrote those things. It's irrelevant. One could say, judge me by my work. That's my all and my everything as far as what I wish my communication to be. But it's much more complicated than that. My record company signs me with the hopes they can sell my records. They want me to juice up the image of who I am beyond what's in the grooves, you know? And I lean toward their desire, and so you play the game of personality. Who am I? What's the gossip behind the records? You do it, hopefully, tastefully, to a certain modest proportion. But you're right when you say it's a feel thing, and you really feel that the heart of the matter is what I do when I go into the recording studio. That's really where I am.
What do you remember about that first time you and Paul, and you may still have been Tom and Jerry then, were on American Bandstand.
I remember going into the men's room before the show, taking a pee, and one of the kids, who was a famous dancer, because they were famous, these guys.
Yeah, they were regulars,
the regular
couples.
dancers,
yeah.
saying to someone else, "Who's on the show today?" And someone else said, "Oh, some jerks, Tom and Jerry or something." And I'm thinking, it's just a funny feeling. Your ego gets so bounced around. I remember that.
If somebody said to you, put 5 or 6 songs in a time capsule, and they're Art Garfunkel's Picassos, which would they be? Either solo or with Simon and Garfunkel? Which would you say represents, that's about the best I can do, or the best I could do at that point in my life?
I liked my single, I Only Have Eyes for You. I thought I held the notes nice and smoothly, so it's good dancing music. I like Scarborough Fair, as I mentioned, and I gotta give Bridge credit for being a really nice, big record. I did a Jimmy Webb song called All I Know in the 70s. I think that came off good. I just did an album called Lefty. I did the old When a Man Loves a Woman. I thought I did it well. I thought I didn't promote it well, so nobody knows it, but I like that a lot.
What was your reaction when some critics, and the song sold well, so it isn't as if this was an across-the-board reaction, but some critics said, on his own, Art Garfunkel is too syrupy, it's too sweet.
What's my reaction?
Yeah, what was your reaction, then or now?
Where do these writers come from? That's my reaction. If only girls wrote the reviews instead of boys, I'd be so much happier. That's my reaction. Males tend to be more literary conscious. Females tend to be more viscerally musical conscious. I think the nature of my appeal falls in that latter category. That's my reaction to those reviewers. Furthermore, now I'll drop my defensiveness and say, I think they're onto something a little bit. Bette Midler once beat me up over the notion of you're more intelligent than the songs you sing. Why don't you get the lyric content up to where you actually are? And my answer would be, well, how many James Taylor, Randy Newman, Paul Simons are there? There's just a handful of poetic, intelligent writers.
What do people approach you with of your past work where they say, this is what moved me, this is what touched me? What do you hear most frequently that you know, really affected people?
It's hard to answer that somehow. Nothing emerges as a specific. They approach me with, when will you guys sing together again? Depends. You know, they say, I fell in love to your... I had a hit outside America that was huge in England and Europe and in Japan called Bright Eyes. It's a very touching lyric. I get a lot of feedback when I'm not in this country on that. People fell in love to it or use it as their wedding song.
Bob Green, who's been a guest on this show, wrote a column in the Chicago Tribune some time ago about bumping into Carole King. And he knew some of Carole King's work, didn't know all of it, got a discography, took a look, and said, wait a minute, how many of us of roughly my age dated with this as the soundtrack, fell in love with this as the soundtrack, played high school basketball and heard this on the radio coming home from the game? Is there some sense that you're a part, do you feel it every day, that you're a part of the lives of millions of people that you've never met?
I don't feel it every day, but I feel it is the really beautiful thing in my lucky life that, yeah, I feel we like to think we're making a contribution to the world, and I feel like I put my sound and my very spirit into the air, whether it's radio or elevator. No, elevators don't have my sound, no. But, yeah, I feel wonderful about that fact. I loved the 60s and thought they were colorful and full of a breakout spirit, and I love that I was part of that breaking out. I love that we got so crazy about being artful in our albums, like the Beatles did. We broke the rules. That's a fabulous aspect of my history, sure.
We go here, I want to mention this book of prose poems, Still Water, which was published a couple of years ago, and my impression leafing through this is that these scribblings have sort of been your companion on your travels through life. They're almost a travel log, an emotional travel log. They're
really more about what makes me tick than anything I've done. It's the first time I've been a creator in the sense of bringing something into existence from that wasn't in existence. In acting and in singing, I take the words of others and interpret. Here, I took my words and found, you know, what I'm about to the best of my ability to be honest and set them down. So I'm proud of that.
Do people have more varied reactions to poems than they do to songs? So I must admit, I look through a book of poetry and I say, sometimes, yeah, I think I know what this man or woman is driving at. And other times I say, this is an interesting arrangement of words, and I guess this could be interpreted 100 ways. Or then I say to myself, maybe I'm just stupid. And then I turn out the light.
Poems intimidate people. It's a tricky word. People throw up a defense as soon as they hear that. A poem is usually a dense affair, you know? A movie is much more spoon-fed and gives you an easier time of it. I get different reactions from that kind of intimidated feeling to the feeling of I really came to know you better than I ever did through anything you've ever done.
Garfunkel for the last couple of nights, and now an invitation to you folks to join us in prime time this coming Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Time, for a half-hour preview of our series of shows set to run next week with Mel Brooks. Until Saturday, or until this time Monday with Mel, see you later.